Greetings, fellow Toastmasters, members, and guests. Have you ever noticed how we tend to prioritize our negative experiences over our positive ones? Bad impressions and bad stereotypes form much more quickly than positive ones do, and are much more difficult to disconfirm than good ones are. Negative memories or negative experiences also tend to stick out in your memory much more. You remember them much strongly and in much more detail. I like to think of myself as an overly optimistic person. But this idea that negative experiences stick out more in your memory than positive ones do really rings true to me. It's true that if we hold on to our past experiences, then it's inevitably going to impact our life in some manner or shape. And the more that we can understand how we weight our negative experiences more than our positive experiences, the more likely we are to reconcile and overcome whatever that negative event was. So let's use an example of my life and sort of illustrate how this really works. During going into the second semester of my sophomore year of college, my roommates and I had the opportunity to stay in our big suite over the winter break. So we were super excited, had all these plans for parties and get-togethers. It was just going to be a grand time, or so I thought. During the first week of winter break, my throat starts to itch, starts to swell up a little bit, my ears are burning. I'm like, oh man, I'm getting sick. So this was shocking to me because my immune system is very strong and I very rarely get sick. But once my throat starts to itch and once my throat starts to get sore, then I know I'm getting sick. That's sort of like my weak spot. My Achilles heel is my throat. After a day or two of the symptoms getting progressively worse, my roommate knocks on the door, comes in and says, hey, I think you should go to the emergency room. So I was hesitant at first, but I was starting to look the way I felt, and he said, yeah, you should probably go. So I took my roommate's advice, get to the emergency room, sign in, go through the customary 3-hour wait before you're actually seen. And I'm starting to get a little bit more concerned about what my sickness may be. So I'm finally in, I finally am able to get seen by a doctor, checks my throat, checks my nose, checks my ears, and comes to the conclusion that I have an infection and that I would need to be prescribed antibiotics. So this was kind of reassuring to me because I had done hours and hours of research on WebMD prior to going to the emergency room, and I was just sure that it was just a simple infection. So I take my antibiotics, I take the first dose, and then I'm on my way back to college, on my way back to campus, and the rest of winter break is going to be awesome. So I'm back to campus, and I'm feeling just like myself, getting stronger. I'm putting the sickness behind me. But the medication is only prescribed for 10 days. And once those 10 days are over, that itch in my throat's back, my throat's swelling up, and I can barely breathe again. I'm like, oh man, here we go again, back to the hospital. So back to the emergency room I go. This time I went, for my second visit, this time it was on a weekend. So the emergency room was much more busier, and my wait was unusually long. It felt like I had to wait at least 5 hours before I was actually seen by a doctor. And I was a bit concerned about my illness, but I was able to finally be seen by a doctor. They check my throat, they check my nose, they check my ears. He comes to the same conclusion, that the infection is back. So he gives me an IV and some stronger antibiotics, but he assures me that it's going to be gone after this 10 days. So I start to take the medicine, and back to campus I go. I'm feeling much stronger this time, and I'm putting the sickness all the way behind me. But of course, after 10 days, it's back. My throat's itching, I can barely breathe. I'm like, what is going on? So I'm getting really worried, and I'm starting to panic now. At this point, it's time to bring out the big guns, and I call my mom. Because we all know if something wants to get done, you have to call your mom, bring them in, they get it done. So I called her, let her know what happened, and she let me know that she was going to meet me at the emergency room, and things were going to go much better this time. So of course, when we get there the third time, it goes much quicker. I'm seen within an hour and a half. It was during a weekday, so it could be that, but I'm pretty sure it's just because my mom was there. And during this time when I'm seen, they do much more extensive tests. They do x-rays, blood tests, and they're really trying to figure out what it was. And at the end of it, they figure out what it was. I had tonsillitis. So tonsillitis is the inflammation of the tonsils, which are in the back of your throat. It's extremely painful. And it was so bad that they wanted to keep me overnight so that they could perform surgery in the next day because it was very severe. They had let me go on for so long. So I, of course, was scared because of the diagnosis and because of the urgency of what the doctor was saying and of the procedure. But at the same time, I was excited because my sort of 3-week to month-long journey of not knowing what was wrong with me was finally coming to an end. So I was a little bit excited. So I thought the worst was behind me, or so I thought. While waiting overnight at the hospital to prepare for my surgery, they had me share a room with another patient. Now, there was nothing wrong with this. The hospital was busy, and they had the generic hospital divider up, which looks like a shower curtain. So it did give me some sense of privacy. I felt okay about that. But the issue is that it wasn't soundproof. And unfortunately, the gentleman that I was sharing the room with was going through intolerable pain. So he's screaming the entire night about how he just wanted the pain to end and he's ready for it to be over with. And so this terrified me. I was nervous, I was scared. Being in such close quarters with somebody who's going through such immense pain is a little bit traumatizing. I eventually did fall asleep, but that moment really sticks out to me to this day. The next day, I had successful surgery, and after a day or so of rest, I was released and able to go back home. But the thing that still lingers with me to this day is that when anybody brings up a hospital or mentions a hospital, I immediately go back to that horror, traumatizing experience of my winter break sophomore year of college. You know, my first thought isn't about how successful the surgery was, or how professional the doctors were, or how happy I was to be fully healed again, or even all the other positive experiences, or semi-positive, that I've had at hospitals before. In this instance, my negative experiences outweighed the positive experiences that I had at hospitals. And I applied this to all hospitals. So every time I would think about going to the hospital, I would just have general mistrust. I had that with all hospitals, and that even extended to some of my doctors. And you can see how that could have ripple effects on your life, not taking care of your health because you're just generally afraid to go. But in reflecting on this experience, I did learn something, and that is you can't apply all your past experiences, a set of experience or a specific experience to all similar situations. You should learn from your past and factor that in when you're dealing with the present, but you should factor it in and let that not let that be the end all be all. So as I share my story today, I hope it encourages some of you to think back to something that you may be avoiding because of a bad experience that in the long run could be positive for you. And if you do think it could be positive, then just maybe give it one more shot. Thank you.
So yeah, as she said, I'm going to be evaluating Nico's speech about negative over positive. Overall, I think you're like one of the best. I think you're one of the best technical speakers in this club. It really shows like just how you move around, how you like your comfort level is really good. The beginning I really liked. You started with a question, and like it kind of piqued my interest. It piqued my interest, and then you personalized it, saying, "Hey, I do this, and if you listen to my story, you can get something out of it too." So it's like, so you make yourself an expert on it, and then you say, "Hey, this is how you can. This will help you if you listen." So I think that's a really good hook, and that's a really good beginning. And in the middle too, I like the humor. Like I like the humor you put in like WebMD stuff. Like I like that too. I'm trying to stop saying like. So, that's why I keep going back, but I catch myself. But you said stuff about WebMD and your mom, and all that was really funny, and it was also informative. The ending was really nice too. You said something about like. You said stuff about how it impacts, well, not how it impacts a lot negatively, but how your one experience in the hospital just kind of carries over to all your experience. And there were good experiences. There were stuff about it that it kind of overshadowed a little bit unfairly. And the stuff that could be better, I feel like the negative and the influence was a bit small. Like, they were a smaller part of the story. Like, the build-up was necessary because you needed to know the full context of the story, but maybe a story about, like, an actual personal story of, like, oh, I went to another doctor for another infection, and I was just thinking about that, like, you know, but I feel like the build-up was a bigger part of the story, and, yeah. And also, and your pacing was good, your hand gesture was good, and I also liked your emphasis on, like, certain things, like, the first time you got out of the hospital, you did like a strong leg. So I like that. I like stuff like that. And yeah, overall you were good. And I did, yeah. And the challenge itself, I would say you were really great technically in the middle and the end, but like in the beginning, I think you were kind of warming up. So to challenge yourself, kind of just hit the ground running. That's it. All right, thank you.
Thank you.